Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to start this class. This is a beautiful sikha. It starts on page 157 in your booklet. I want to, your student book, I want to remind everybody that on June 5th, that week, starts again starts the second, it starts the book of Shemos, the book of Exodus. And we need to, if you want the book to continue the class, I think it's something like $20. You need to call the office, or I think the office send out an email, and you can sign it up, and we'll get a book to you. Either send it to you by mail, or you'll pick it up at the Chabad house. The class tonight is on Chanukah. It's a sikh of the Rebbe, to talk of the Rebbe about the whole story of Chanukah and the meaning of Chanukah to us. The beauty of the Rebbe was the Rebbe took everything that you find in Torah, and especially the Yom Tovim, the holidays that Yidden celebrate, and he took it and he explained it in such a way that it makes it so relevant and so important even until today. This teachings and what we learn from the Yom Tov, and this is where we are right now in the midst of the Yom Tov of Chanukah. Now, this class is not meant does not mention the Pasha. I'm just going to make maybe at the end some kind of a little connection between the Pasha and the class. I think it's also very open, and you could be able to see the connection between the portion of the week, which deals the story of Joseph, and starting off with Joseph and his brothers, and ultimately being sold into Egypt. And as we learn Chitas every morning, today he becomes, on this week's, in today's Chitas, he becomes the viceroy of Egypt. And it's a beautiful story, and the story continues. And then, and as the brothers come down to Egypt, in the next portion, and the following portion. So we are going to start off with, to give you a perspective in the story of the background, not of the background, but the history. You have to put the whole Chanukah story, I believe, in context of the history of when that happened and what was happening in the land of Israel at that time in general. So I found a dateline a little bit to give us a dateline of what was the dateline of the story of Chanukah. So you have in front of you, I'm sharing with you a timeline. And I'm going to show you another picture in a moment. It'll give you also a general timeline. So on either 10th or 13th, 11th of June, in the year 323 BC, Alexander died in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, and he was 32 years old. Israel was under Alexander, and Israel was under the Greeks. And as history continues, he died, and ultimately, I'm not a Greek historian, but ultimately the kingdom was divided into four parts, I believe. The most important two parts that connects to Jews is, as it says over here, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. These had two sides of their kingdom, went through Eretz Yisrael, and that's why Eretz Yisrael went from the Ptolemies to the Seleucids, and it went backwards and forwards. It was constantly going backwards and forwards. According to history, the Jews were closer to Ptolemy. They wanted Ptolemy, but ultimately, in 198 BCE, the armies of the Seleucid kings of Antiochus III, he kicked the Ptolemies Ptolemy the Fifth out of Judea and Samaria, and he took over Israel. He was actually, they say, he was good to the Jews until 175 BCE. Antiochus the Fourth became the king, and in 168 BCE, under the siege of Antiochus the Fourth, the Second Temple is looted, Jews are massacred, and Judaism is outlawed in 168 BCE. So he came in, and he started to make a lot of tzaddis, the Jews, outlawed them in keeping Shabbos, in keeping learning Torah. That's the whole dreidel thing came up, and all these things. They weren't allowed to circumcise. Many harsh decrees. In 167 BCE, Antiochus ordered the altar to Zeus erected in the temple. And that's when the whole story of Chanukah happened, in 167 BCE. And Matisyahu and his 5 sons, Shimon, Eliezer, Jonathan, Judah, lead a rebellion against Antiochus, and Judah becomes known as Judah Maccabee. And the story of Chanukah is in 167 BCE. And it lasts for many years. As you see, in 63 BCE, the Hashmonaim Jewish king comes to an end, and Rome annexed Judah. So that's over 100 years. Rome takes over the Holy Land, and ultimately in 70 CE, that's this common era, destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans. The Second Temple lasted for total of 585 years, from 516 to 1770 CE. So that's what's happening. You have to put the focus on what's happening in Eretz Yisrael before the story of Chanukah, and even after the story of Chanukah. We know there's a lot of things that happened there. We know it also wasn't such a great time, because even though that the Hashmonaim ruled, but they were also puppets. Many of them were puppets of the Romans. If you want to see another diagram, I'll share with you another colorful diagram of the history. You have it big. I click it on it. It comes a bit bigger. You look over here. You have I want you to just put into context of, because we're going to mention the Gemara. So if over here, Purim happened in 400 BCE. That's when the Second Temple was rebuilt. And the destruction of the Second Temple out of 1770 CE. And Chanukah happened, as you see, around 167 BCE. Now, if you think about it, the Mishnah was written 200 CE, Common Era, and the Gemara was written 500 Common Era. So this is, when we're going to mention the Gemara over here, the statement of the Gemara is something that is over 600 years after the story of Chanukah. After the story of Chanukah, so we have from the Mishnah was written around 200 CE, Common Era, and the Gemara ultimately was finished 300 years later, or even more. I don't know exactly the dates. Close to 300 years later, the Gemara was finished. The Talmud was finished. Well, we learned the Talmud. We have the books of the Talmud. So the Mishnah was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. As he says there, I think, can't read exactly the number there, that says the Mishnah was when exactly the Mishnah was written. I cannot see it. I think it says 200 CE, and the Gemara is 600 CE. But if you take this whole picture, the history of what's going on from the destruction of the first temple, from the rebuilding, from Purim, the holiday of Purim, which starts the rebuilding of the second temple until the destruction of the second temple. So you have that period of time, and ultimately until the Gemara was written, was brought together hundreds of years later. So from the time of the second temple until today, Jews have not been totally free, so to say, to do whatever they want. Totally. Even though they had wars and they won, but they were either under the Greeks or the Romans or the Antiochus, the Seleucids, whatever you call those nations. Hundreds of years they were under these things. So Chanukah is happening right in the middle of this whole Mishigas. So this is what you just imagine the history of the Jews living in Eretz Yisrael, and they're under the harsh decrees, like in Russia, for many years, and the temple is still there, but there's a statue, there's a getchka, so to say. There's an imagery in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash in Jerusalem. And there's even Kehanim. You can go to learn the history. There's even the high priests that were put in by the Greeks. And there were even high priests, if you go look into history, that were not even Kehanim. They were put in by the Greeks and by these powers to be. And ultimately, they were put in just because of the money they had or the connections they had with authorities. So let's go to text number 1. And the Gemara, therefore, you have to understand why the Gemara asks a question, an interesting question, which any child you ask today the question, he'll know the answer to the question. But the Gemara, the sages of the Gemara that live much closer to the story than we did, the Gemara asks the question, my Chanukah, what is Chanukah? The Gemara asks the question, my Chanukah, what's Chanukah? The Gemara didn't know what Chanukah was. So if you go to text number 2 a second, before we go to the answer of the Gemara, Rashi underlines what's the question of the Gemara. My Chanukah, Rashi says in text number 2 on page 158, Al Ezen Nes Kavu, on what miracle did they establish Chanukah? What was the great miracle of Chanukah? And what was the miracle of Chanukah? On which miracle? There were one miracle? Was it 2 miracles? What exactly? Which miracle are we celebrating in Chanukah? So let's go back to text number 1. The Gemara this is a Gemara in Shabbos. It's interesting also that we find that there's a whole Gemara on Megillah, but there's no Gemara on Chanukah. Very little. This is the whole Gemara on Chanukah. On this great miracle that we celebrate 8 days for thousands of years, this is the whole Gemara. This is the whole Talmud. It's in the middle of a Masechta, the tractate of Shabbos, which the Gemara talks about lighting Shabbos candles, and that segues it into Chanukah. And the Gemara there asks, my Chanukah, what is Chanukah? So our sages taught, the Gemara answers, on the 25th of Kislev, there are 8 days of Chanukah. One may not eulogize on them, one may not fast on them, because when the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oil that was in the sanctuary. When the Hashmonaim monarchy overcame them and emerged victorious, they searched and found only 1 jug of oil, with the high priest's seal remaining. There was sufficient oil there to light the menorah for only 1 day. A miracle occurred, and they lit from one jug for 8 days. The next year, the sages instituted those days and made them a holiday with the recitation of Hallel and special thanksgiving. Now, any 5-year-old kid can ask the question, what happened with the Maccabees? Every 5-year-old child knows the Maccabees, Judah Maccabee. Judah Maccabee, the hero of the story. His 5 brothers, they went out to war. They won a war. The Gemara, this is the whole Gemara. This is the whole Talmud on the story of Chanukah. What happened to the Maccabees? How come the Gemara doesn't mention anything about the Maccabees? The victory of war. Doesn't mention anything. Not a word over here. It says that when they went in, they found oil. And that's the celebration. It's a very interesting expression. It's a very interesting Gemara. Very interesting Gemara. So therefore, we got to find some place in Halacha that talks about the Maccabees. There's got to be somebody who talks about the Maccabees. We're not celebrating the Maccabees for no reason. So therefore, you go to text number 2a. Over here, we find a Maimonides. Maimonides, which lived 500 years after, 1,000 years after the Gemara. He writes in his laws, Mishnah Torah, he writes as follows. Text number 2a. In the Second Temple area, the Greek kingdom issued decrees against the Jewish people, attempting them to nullify their faith and refusing them to allow them to observe Torah and its commandments. They extended their hands against their property and their daughters. They entered the sanctuary, wrought havoc within, and made the sacred impure. The Jews suffered great difficulties, for they oppressed them greatly until God of our ancestors had mercy upon them and delivered them from their hands and saved them. How did he do that? Oh, here we have it. The sons of the Chashmonai, the high priest, overcame, slew them, and saved the Jews from their hands. Okay, so we have a mention, we have in Halacha, we have a mention of the Maccabees, the victory of the war. There's some aspect of a victory of the war. They appointed a king for the priest and sovereignty to return to Israel for more than 200 years. Didn't last forever. For 200 years until the destruction of the Second Temple, which happened in 70 CE. So here we have an historical account by the Rambam. He's talking about the Rambam's codifier of Jewish law. And over here, he puts in the concept of the victory. Now, he's not finished with it, the Rambam. The Rambam is not totally finished. And therefore, you go to text number 2b, the Rambam continues. And he says, when the Jews overcame their enemies and destroyed them, so now he says the second part of the story. Number one, we were victorious against our enemies. We overcame our enemies. Now he adds something else. He says another thing. When the Jewish people overcame their enemies and they destroyed them, they entered the sanctuary. This was on the 25th day of Kislev. You could not find any pure oil in the sanctuary except for a single jug. It contained enough oil to burn merrily 1 day. They lit an arrangement of candles from it for 8 days until they could crush olive and purchase more oil. So here the Rambam says, okay, number one, we were victorious on a war. Number two, the candles burnt 8 days. And therefore, let's end with the Rambam, 2c. The Rambam writes, accordingly, the sages of the generation ordained that these 8 days, which begin on the 25th of Kislev, should be commemorated as days of happiness praise to God. Candles should be lit in the evening at the entrance of the house on each and every one of the 8 nights to publicize the revealed miracle. These days are called Chanukah. It's forbidden to utilize the fast on them. And on these, as on the days of Purim, lighting candles on these days is a rabbinical mitzvah, like reading the Megillah on Purim. Lighting candles is a rabbinical mitzvah. It's one of the 7 rabbinical mitzvahs. So here the Rambam, Maimonides, he says 3 things. Divides into 3 things. Number 1, suppression or oppression by the Greeks and the Jewish people's salvation. Number 2 is the miracle of the oil. Number 3 is the establishment of the holiday and the singing of praises, Hallel. You see, on Purim we don't say Hallel. On Chanukah we say Hallel every day, all the 7 days. All the 8 days, I'm sorry. So here we have the Gemara, the Talmud, that doesn't mention anything about any victory of war. And the Rambam, who's the first one to codify and to bring in a lot. I think I froze for a second. Okay. So does the Rambam contradict the Torah? The Rambam contradict the Gemara? That's really the question. Does the Rambam contradict the Gemara? Why didn't the Gemara mention the war? Why did the Gemara seemingly just wash over the whole situation of the victory of the war? So how do we put the two together? The Gemara seemingly saying one thing and the Rambam seemingly saying another thing. And can we put them together? Could we put them together? So really, let's come down to practical. How do you celebrate Chanukah? We light candles. We light candles. That's the way we celebrate Chanukah. So really, that's the Gemara. The Gemara is you light candles. How do we celebrate the victory of the war? How do we celebrate victory of the war? Really, the victory of the war is like Purim, the victory over Haman. Haman tried to kill us, and we survived. We won the war. So how do we celebrate Purim? We eat. We make a Suda. Suda's Purim. It's our obligation to celebrate Purim with a Suda. So why wouldn't you make a Suda on Chanukah? If it's the victory of the war, why are we not making a meal? That's usually how you're supposed to celebrate salvation of a war. You would try to even in halacha, you survive a tragedy, God forbid. Some actually not even tragedy. If 4 different people that go through 4 different challenges in life, if they come through it healthy, they went to the hospital, God forbid, they went in through a boat in a dangerous journey, they have to go out of prison, they have to make a Suda. That's the way today you need to celebrate victory over wars. That's what we do on Purim. We celebrate the victory of the war of our salvation through a Suda Purim. We read the Megillah, we give gifts, but we also celebrate through a Suda, through making a meal and sitting down to a Suda. So why don't we have a Suda on Chanukah? Is there an official Suda? Should we have a meal on Chanukah? Because really the lighting of the menorah is really the miracle of the oil. So where is the miracle mentioned? That's the Gemara. Where is the miracle of the victory? So therefore you have in text number 3a, you have an argument about this concept. Meir Rutenberg lived from 1269 to 1343. A very famous codifier of Jewish law. He's also the Tur. and Baal Turim. This was a great, great sage. And he writes, Meir Rutger would say that many feasts, some staged, some during the days of Chanukah, are only optional. There's no mitzvah to serve a special Chanukah meal. Why? Since the holiday is not established as one feasting and drinking. That's not the holiday. But rather one thanksgiving and praising alone. So Rabbi Rutenberg says there's no concept on Chanukah to make a feast. There's no obligation to make a feast. The obligation to praise God. And the way we praise the Eibishter is by saying Hallel, by lighting candles. There's no obligation to sit down and have a Suda. Comes another sage in text 3b and says the opposite. One rabbi says, as a matter of law, I tend to disagree with Meir Rutenberg, in so much as the custom of eating a festive meal on Chanukah is already widespread and has been supported by great rabbis of previous generations. The Marshal also writes that the Rambam implies as such by describing Chanukah as days of joy. Shalom of Oshir writes explicitly that on Chanukah one should be joyful and partake in a festive meal. So here we see that there are sages who hold you didn't mean to make a festive meal. Chanukah is a celebration of victory, and just like in every victory you need to have a meal, that's the way you celebrate it today. You should celebrate it, the celebration of a meal. Should you have a meal every 8 days? Should you have a meal once in those 8 days? But there needs to be a Suda. You need to sit down and celebrate and make a Suda, like a Suda on Purim. You need to celebrate a meal on one of the days of Chanukah. What do you do exactly? And I don't know. I don't remember ever making a special Suda for Chanukah. We eat latkes, but therefore comes a Moshe Islis in text number 4. The Rama, famous Ashkenazic rabbi, the codifier of Jewish Ashkenazic Jewry, who lived in went to Shulchan Aruch. He was part of the Shulchan Aruch. He was the rabbi of Krakow. He's buried in Krakow. So he says in text number 4, he says, the many meals which we add on these days are voluntary meals. He says, listen, comes in the middle. He said it's voluntary. You want to make a meal? You can make it. You're not obligated like on Purim to make a meal. You're obligated. But on Chanukah, it's a voluntary. Since the sage has not established them as days of feasting and joy. So the Moshe says we got to go back to the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't. So this is what I'm sorry. This is what the Shulchan Aruch says. This is what Rabbi Yosef Cairo says. Then Ramah, some say there is somewhat of a mitzvah to add meals because the altar was rededicated during these days. The prevailing custom is to recite hymns and songs of praise during these Chanukah feasts, and then there are in many cases considered a mitzvah meal. So ultimately, if you want to come down to a conclusion in halacha, you can make a meal. You can sing songs, sing praises to the Eibishter, but it's not an obligation. It's not an obligation to do. So really the question is, why? Really the question is why? And in truth is, I want the Rebbe over here, this class is called Every Victory Worth Celebrating. Is every victory worth celebrating? There's seemingly from the Gemara and from Halacha, even from the latest sages, the Rambam, Moshe Islis, Rambam Rutenberg. These are great Talmidei Chachamim, great sages who codified law, and they held that there was something. This was not a total victory. This was not the victory of all victories. This was a victory. The Jewish people got rid of an oppression from their midst. But as the Gemara expressed itself, really the miracle here was the miracle of the lights, the miracle of the 8 days of the menorah, the miracle of the oil. The Gemara and even the sages that have codified law after the Gemara, hundreds of years after the Gemara, hundreds of years after Shulchan Aruch, emphasized more on the menorah. The menorah became more the symbol of the holiday of Chanukah. Even though the Gemara and all the sages from then until today, from the beginning of time, from the story of Chanukah, know that there was a great victory, the victory of the Chashmonai. Nobody's arguing with that victory. The question is, was it a complete victory? And should we celebrate that complete victory? That's really the struggle. Most rabbis want to say that we shouldn't. That's why the Gemara doesn't celebrate the victory, because it was not ultimately, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Until the destruction of the temple, there was a lot of tzaras by Yidden, and even the Chashmonaim were not so holy and so great. They ultimately were fighting with each other. You can go and look up the history of the rulership on the Chashmonaim. We know that the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, didn't put the Chashmonaim in the halacha because he felt the Chashmonaim were Kohanim and they overstepped their boundaries, becoming kings. They should have stayed in the realm of the Kohanim priests, and not in the realm of the tribe of Judah, but more in the realm of the tribe of the Kohen Levi that they serve HaKadosh Baruch. So really, the Rebbe is going to take both of these concepts, Chashmonaim, the 5 sons of Matisyahu were called Chashmonaim. That was the name of the family, the Chashmonaim. Hashmonaim, the Chashmon, in Hebrew, the Chashmonaim. Judah HaMaccabee was one of the Chashmonaim. Matisyahu was the father of the Chashmonaim. That was their name. So therefore, in text number 5, you have over here a statement of Rav Mordechai Yafi. Look what he says. Purim involved a decree by Haman to physically obliterate the Jewish people. As such, it is fitting to celebrate the physical survival of our nation by engaging in a physical pleasure by eating and drinking. By contrast, Chanukah is a celebration of the victory of the Jewish spirit over the pressure exerted by the Hellenistic culture. The Greeks did not threaten to kill the Jews, but rather issued decrees against the performance of Newman Torah's commandments. So here, Antiochus did this as a common practice of conquerors imposing their faith and culture on their victims, after which all he would do was tax them and nothing more. Therefore, Chanukah main focus is spiritual. That's what this rabbi wants to say, to give thanks and praise God who helped us regain our independence, thereby preserving our religious identity. The Rebbe takes this concept and he wants to say that still it's a victory. Even it might not be a complete victory, it is still a victory. And as Jews, we need to celebrate any victory that we might have. It doesn't make a difference that you have not completed the total victory. In essence, the Rebbe wants to bring the Rambam and the Gemara and the sages together and say they are not diminishing the victory of the Chashmonaim. The victory of the Chashmonaim is a victory, and Jews need to celebrate that victory. But the most important aspect of Chanukah is the concept of the oil, is the concept of the light. But not that we should not celebrate the victory of the Chashmonaim. So look in text number 6, the way the Rebbe says that. The argument between two views, Chanukah being established for military miracles, or only because the miracle of oil, the Rebbe says, according to my feeling, it's not an argument over fact. All agree that the physical oppression began as a result of spiritual oppression. We all agree, ultimately, Antiochus not only became spiritually oppressive to the Jews, he became physically oppressive to the Jews. The difference was that it started off as a spiritual oppression, ultimately turned into a physical oppression. The argument is rather a matter of opinion. Is a joyous holiday warranted for a physical redemption precipitated by religious decree or not? That's their argument. Since it was a religious fight to begin with, it was not a physical fight. Chanukah Purim was a physical fight. Haman didn't care that the Jewish people were keeping Torah mitzvahs. It didn't bother him. Let the Jews keep Torah mitzvahs. Let them not keep Torah mitzvahs. It was irrelevant to him. He was like Hitler in Machshamai. He wanted to kill the Jewish people. So therefore, the sages said, we need to make it's in essence a celebration of the victory of the body, victory of the physical. Chanukah began as a spiritual victory, as a spiritual struggle, turned ultimately into a physical struggle. What should be the focus in such a victory? Should the focus be on the physical, or the focus should be on the spiritual? The Gemara felt it should be on the spiritual. Even though it was a victory, comes the sage and say, listen, if you feel that it was a physical victory, you're right, and make a suda, make a party. If you feel that this was a physical victory, and you're right, it was a physical victory, but since the Gemara felt that it started off as a spiritual victory, it should stay a spiritual victory. Or do we say, since ultimately it was a physical victory, do we connect it to the physical too? And that's why the sages come and say, if you want to celebrate the holiday as a physical victory, make a party, make a suda, celebrate the holiday as a physical victory. You're 100% right, because ultimately we all agree that it was a physical victory. Now, why would the sages do that? Why would there be an argument? And here the Rebbe says, why is it important for us to celebrate small victories? To celebrate even small physical victories. It's even though the greater ness was a spiritual ness, in the begin with, he wanted to take away Yiddishkeit from the Jews. At the end, not only did he couldn't take away the Judaism for the Jews, but God showed a miracle to the menorah. The oil lasted 8 days, a spiritual ness. But what about those small Jewish victories? That they got rid of their oppression. Those are small victories. It's not even not the main victory, but it is an unbelievable victory. It is something. And the truth is, even though the Jewish people won they won the war of Antiochus, they still were under the Roman rule. They ultimately never became totally free. They were still under the Greeks, and they were ultimately still then came under the Romans, and then the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And if we know the history from then until the destruction of the temple, King Hadrian came in, and he was not too good with the Jews. This was a struggling situation even from the time of Chanukah. But we should still celebrate them, because every victory today needs to be celebrated. Every victory, that's what the Rebbe says in the Rambam, Maimonides. and emphasized by Moshe Issus. So Maimonides was a Sfadi. Moshe Issus was a Ashkenazi. Both of these sages ultimately say, my friends, you're right. The spiritual victory is something that lasted from then until today. The physical victory, we're still in the struggle. The victory has not been completed, not by the Chashmonaim, and not since then have we ultimately got out of our physical oppression. It didn't stop at the Chashmonaim totally, and ultimately failed with destruction of the second temple. But still, it's a physical victory. And every victory a Jew has, he should make a party. So the Rebbe comes and says, the lesson of Chanukah has a double lesson. The Rebbe takes everybody. That's the beauty of the Rebbe. He takes everybody. He says, listen, take the victory of the menorah, a spiritual victory. You want to celebrate that spiritual victory? That's what the sages wanted. You should celebrate the spiritual victory. You have small victories, and maybe not be complete. Your spiritual victory might be complete, but your physical victory is not complete. Small victory. I overcame myself. That doesn't mean you're not going to still be under struggles. No, but it's a small victory. Make a kiddush. Make a celebration. Comes the Rambam and says, you're right, the Chashmonaim was a victory. A physical victory, a war, a physical war. It was not a complete victory. We all know that. The Rambam's not arguing with the Gemara that it was a complete victory. You can look up the history. It was not a complete victory, but it was a victory. And therefore you should celebrate. Comes the Rambam and says you should celebrate. Comes the Moshe Issus says you should celebrate. Make a celebration. Why not? Even though you're not obligated, make a celebration. Because every small victory is a celebration. And the Rebbe brings an analogy. How we see that. How we see small victories should be celebrated. We don't need big victories to celebrations. We can celebrate. Also, Chanukah teaches us we can celebrate on small victories. And the Rebbe gives a proof. On page 167, text number 7, the Gemara says, Abaye said, may I receive my reward for when I see a young Torah scholar who has completed a tractate that he studied, I make a feast for the sages. Why would you make a feast for the sage when he finished one tractate of the Talmud? He didn't finish the whole Talmud. He only finished one tractate. There's over 50 tractates in the Talmud. So what are you making a celebration on one tractate? What's the big deal? I can give you a tractate of 40 pages. Everybody can make a completion on a tractate. Today for sure, you have the article. You can learn 40 pages of the Talmud, and you'll make a siyum. Abaye will make a party for you. Abaye says if a young man makes a siyum on a 40-page tractate, he made a party. Not he made a party. He made a party for all the rabbis. He invited all the rabbis, all the leaders in. He made a party for this one guy who made. Why? What's so great about that? I understand the guy finished the whole Talmud. Will make a party. But that's the lesson. The lesson is make a party. He completed one tractate. Let's party. That's unbelievable accomplishment. We don't need to have the whole Talmud to make a party. To make a celebration. So you look at 7b, Moshe Issus underlines this. He says, it's a mitzvah. If a guy finishes one tractate, and I give you the challenge. Whoever's listening to me to this class, learn a tractate. Take a tractate and learn a tractate of Talmud. Finish it. It's a great celebration. Abaye in the Talmud said he made a great celebration. Now Moshe Issus says the mitzvah to rejoice and to make a festival meal when one completes a tractate in Talmud. This meal is considered a mitzvah meal. So both of them say the same thing. You need to celebrate it when you accomplish small accomplishments. Yeah, you can pick a big tractate. There's a tractate that of 150 blocks, it's 150 pages. It's going to take you longer. But you can find a tractate that's 40 pages, 39 pages. Masechta Sotah, 39 pages. Take you a couple of months. You'll complete a tractate in Talmud. And over here, Moshe Yisrael says, when you complete a tractate in Talmud, make a big celebration. Does that mean that you completed the whole Shas? Does that mean you completed the whole Talmud? No, you haven't. But it's a big thing. It's a great accomplishment. The Rebbe says this is the beauty of Chanukah, my friends. This is the beautiful lesson, the whole Gemara and the whole halacha comes to teach us a beautiful lesson to us in our own struggles in our life. That we shouldn't think that we have to win the war to celebrate. We don't need to win the war to celebrate. We need to win victories. We need to win victories, how big or small they are. That's not important. Even small victories is to a human being a big thing and should be a great celebration. So the Rebbe writes, the Alter Rebbe brings down Tanya in number 8 in your class. Let's roll on. The body is called a small city. Imagine 2 kings waging war over a town, each one wishing to capture it and rule over it, namely to dominate its inhabitants according to his will. So they will obey him and all the decrees in them. So it's with the 2 souls, the divine soul and the vitalizing animal soul that comes from Klippa. They wage war against each other of the body and the limbs. It's a war happening within me. I win, my godly soul wins over my animal soul. It's a victory. Have I vanquished my animalistic soul? No. But I've had a victory. Look further. The Alter Rebbe says in text number 9a, for this reason, no person should feel depressed, nor should his heart become exceedingly troubled, because though he may engage in a conflict for the rest of his life, here the Alter Rebbe tells you, you're not going to win the war. Victory is not winning the war. That doesn't mean you're going to win the war. A victory is a victory over this struggle. The Chashmonaim won a victory over that struggle. Did they win the war? No, they didn't. That's what the Gemara is mentioning. But the sages ultimate, the Rambam does mention it because it's a victory. Because though he may engage in a conflict for the rest of his life, perhaps it was this for this very reason he was created. For this mission to continually overcome evil, victory by victory, struggle by struggle, issue by issue, be victorious. Look in text number 9b, the Alter Rebbe continues. Indeed, the rabbis of blessed memories have said, he who has passively abstained from committing a sin receives a reward as though he's performed a mitzvah. Holding yourself back is also a great mitzvah. Most of us think not doing a sin is not such a big thing. Fighting, doing a sin, and doing tshuva is a big thing. But not doing a sin, what's such a big thing? Comes out to the Rebbe says no. Consequently, the Alter Rebbe says, if I don't do an avera, don't do a sin, one ought to rejoice, make a party. Every time a situation comes to me and I don't do it, I should make a party. It's a victory. Controlling his thoughts, just as he would when performing an actual mitzvah. Moreover, sadness on the account of the emphasis of the negative thinking only comes from conceit. That's the problem when we think, oh, how can I celebrate this victory when I still know I'm evil? How can I celebrate this that I have overcome A? I know that I have B, C, D, E, F. That's how the Alter Rebbe says, if you cannot celebrate the victory, then that's your Yetzer Hara. Your evil inclination is telling you cannot celebrate that victory. You have to overcome your Yetzer Hara. Your Yetzer Hara doesn't want you to celebrate victories because your Yetzer Hara is smart. And he says the only way you can celebrate is you become a tzaddik. That's not going to happen. So therefore, celebrate every victory. He simply does not recognize his place. Hence, he is sad in his heart because he's not attained the rank of a tzaddik. While the righteous are certainly not troubled by such foolish thoughts. So the Alter Rebbe says, if you think it's either all or nothing, that's a foolish thought. That's not a Jewish concept. That's your evil inclination. That's what Chanukah teaches us. I draw you the picture of the history. Trust me, the Jewish people were not out of trouble from the story of Chanukah. If you go back and look at history, they were victorious. There was a great miracle with the light. There was a reprieve from Antiochus. There was not total reprieve in history, my friend. It wasn't. But we still celebrate this victory. We still celebrate this day of Chanukah. Because every small step, every small accomplishment is a victory. But how do you recognize his situation? See, that's your Yetzer Hara says you should be somebody else. My evil inclination basically tells me be somebody else. Until I'm somebody else, I'm not perfect. And that's the evil inclination. Person has to know his place. Has to know who he is. I know who I am. I know my evil inclinations. I know my shortcomings. I know I'm not perfect. And even though I do something good, I know still that that doesn't make me a perfect person. And I might do 2 things good. I'm still not a perfect person. I might be 100 things good. I'm still not a perfect person. Because everybody knows his evil inclination. So he knows what he does perfectly. He knows what he does not perfectly. So why should I celebrate? That's why, because that's Yetzer Hara. Yetzer Hara tells you have to be a perfect person. And that's not true. You do not need to be a perfect person. You need to be who you are. I need to be who I am. And that's the beauty of Chanukah. Be who you are. Should the Chashmonaim taken over, the become the kings? Rabbi Yehuda said no. But they did. They did. We still celebrate the victory. Were they perfect people? No. Again, go look it up in history. You'll see they were fighting within each other. Ultimately, the Chashmonaim were totally wiped out. And then we got Hadrian, who wiped out thousands and hundreds of thousands of Jews. Ultimately did a wonderful thing, rebuilt the second temple. And that's what we celebrate. The rebuilding of the second temple of Hadrian would only last for 60 years. And it was ultimately destroyed by the Romans. So that's the beauty, my friends, of this story, of the whole picture. If you comprehend the whole picture, and trust me, there's a lot to this picture. You should look at the history. Might depress you, but you'll realize, maybe through understanding this class, you'll realize it won't depress you, because even in all the troubles the Jewish people were going through then, and there was troubles from without and troubles from within, there was a lot of problems, a lot of struggles. Jewish people themselves were struggling between each other, and the struggle did not end by the story of Chanukah. But still, the Jewish people celebrated their victories. They celebrated the positive, even though there was still negative. When Mashiach comes, that's when the negative will disappear. Until then, there's always going to be positive and negative in any situation. So let's finish this off. Then he should be happy with a Beinoni and not with a Rasha for even a single moment. That's it. Be happy to be a middleman. Don't be a tzaddik. I might never be a tzaddik. Be a middleman. This is the quality of in-betweeners. And their service is to subdue the evil impulse and thoughts rising from his heart to the brain, and to completely avert his mind therefrom. thrusting temptations away with both hands, has been seen, explained earlier. That doesn't mean that the temptation is not going to come back. That does not mean that the evil desire to do a sin is not going to come back. It will. So even though you overcame it today, tomorrow the fight begins again. The fight begins anew. So here we come to coming to the conclusion of the class. The Rebbe, we come to the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. We've been talking about the Alter Rebbe, but we come to the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, page 107. One can never know how they will end up. As the sages say, never believe yourself until the day you die. How then can we celebrate a birthday before knowing whether we'll succeed in our mission? What are we celebrating? Why are you celebrating any birthday? Why are you celebrating a bar mitzvah boy? What's the celebration of a mitzvah boy? We're celebrating that he became bar mitzvah. Bar mitzvah means son of commandments. How do you know he's going to keep the commandments? How do you know that this boy or this bas mitzvah girl is going to be a person that will keep Torah and mitzvahs? So what are you celebrating? What's the celebration? Let's wait till 100 years and we'll celebrate the bar mitzvah because now we know they kept it or they didn't keep it. We're making a whole celebration on this bar mitzvah and bas mitzvah kid. Make a big party. For what? How do you know they're going to keep one mitzvah? How we're celebrating them? What is the celebration? It really doesn't make sense. Celebrating something that didn't start even. That we don't even know what this kid, let's give it a year at least. Let's see what happens within a year. We'll make the celebration the 14th year, the 15th year. See what happens. See if they grow up, if they're going to follow the laws, not going to follow. What are we celebrating? So you know what the answer is, the Rebbe says? The answer is simple. Here the Rebbe answers. A central tenet in halacha is that every Jew is treated with the assumption of being righteous. We are sure that this boy and this girl are going to be, like it says, bar mitzvah. He's going to do everything, every mitzvah. Bat mitzvah, she's going to do every mitzvah. We have no doubt. I hear the most of these kids get up and they say, drasha. They're becoming responsible, they're becoming adults. They're ready to take upon responsibility of the Torah mitzvahs. Sure. But we trust them. We put our full trust that they're going to do that. And we make a party. Meanwhile, meaning, we assume that every Jew surely follows every one of the mitzvahs. We don't doubt. When I see a Jew, why would I doubt that he doesn't follow Torah mitzvahs? I'm not supposed to question him if he follows Torah mitzvahs. I have no doubt. You know, we Chabadis, we go out, we ask a person if you put on tefillin. He says, yeah, we accept it, yeah. We're going to say, wait, maybe, well, let me see your arm. Give me a card that says you put on Torah, you put on the tefillin. You said you put on tefillin. You said I put on tefillin. Fine. I accept every Jew. I mean, a Jew, he says he follows every commandment. I say, great. I don't doubt a Jew. Every Jew innately wishes to perform all mitzvahs and distance himself from all sins. Moreover, this status can be reacquired at any moment. And let's say you find a Jew that does not. If you find a Jew that let's say you have a child that maybe you know that he was not taught anything, you can do it tomorrow. You can do it tomorrow. You can start today. So why should I always think negative? I always think positive. That every Jew and every Jewish kid and every Jewish boy and every Jewish girl is doing everything. There's no question of mine. I don't doubt that everybody's doing everything. I know myself I'm not doing everything, but I'm sure that every other Jew is doing everything. I don't want anybody to look at me negatively, and I'm not going to look at anybody else negatively. Therefore, when somebody comes and tells me, "Oh, I want to tell you the things I don't do," I say, "I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear. I'm not interested. I'm not we don't. It's not a confession. I don't want to hear your negatives. I don't want to hear. That's between you and God. To me, you're perfect. You're a perfect Jew. And the truth is, you're not perfect. You can become perfect in 1 second. As it says in Tanya, any average person can reach a state where they are considered to have never sinned. That's it. You can do tshuva. All your sins become positive. All your sins become mitzvahs. So when a young person becomes newly obligated bar mitzvah, we joyfully mark the day we celebrate. We are happy. Do we know the journey of this child? We're sure that he's going to be successful. If he's going to fall, we know he'll do tshuva. We know, not we hope, we know that he's going to be perfect. We know they will prevail. That was the beauty of the Rebbe. Why celebrate? Even though right now maybe you don't know what's going to happen. No, we trust. So not only should we celebrate in a victory, we should celebrate before there's a victory. And that's what we do. We celebrate before there's a victory. We celebrate with a chas and kala before we know how happy the marriage is going to be. We celebrate with a mitzvah before we know if he's going to keep Torah mitzvah or not. It's not important. To us, it's a celebration that God gave these people the responsibility, the schos, the merit to do the 613 commandments. So therefore, the Rebbe ends off in text number 11. Beautiful. This is a sikh of the Rebbe. The Rebbe, they just put it together as a package. The message of Ala Nisim should encourage anyone wishing to return to God. Even if you were very recently impure, or even wicked, etc., overwhelmed by your evil inclination, or you felt helplessly weak and few in the face of your nemesis, who were more powerful and more vast in quantity and quality, you must know that your true identity is holy, righteous, and dedicated to Torah. That's who you really are. So look at yourself in that way. Don't put yourself down. No Jew should put himself down. This is who you really are. Internalizing this will able to overcome your past. The problem is the Yetzer Hara keeps on putting us down. The Yetzer Hara keeps on coming back and saying, no, you're nothing. No, you're not so good. No, you're never going to be good. Stop it already. That's your evil inclination. Celebrate who you are, who you really are, and that is that you're a godly soul. Every one of us will eventually come around and build our personal temple. Just as it happened in the temple of the Maccabees, we will empty ourselves from all toxic waste. Then we will clean and purify our temple until finally we will light up our souls with the flame passion of good. We will then merit to thank and sing the praises to his great name. The Rebbe took this whole concept of Chanukah and the victory of the oil and the victory of the war to each and every one of us to realize that that's what we celebrated today. We celebrated today because it's our own victories. And just like the Hashmonaim was not a perfect victory, but it was a victory over the poor, over the impure. It was a victory of the minute over the many. It was a victory of good over evil. Was the evil vanquished? No. But it was a victory. And we should celebrate those victories. Just to connect it to the Parsha, since it's supposed to be a Parsha class, we can learn that the Rebbe says also from Yosef HaTzadik, Chol asher oisa Hashem matzliach. Yosef HaTzadik, and as we see later, Yosef says that later also, Yosef HaTzadik looked at every stage of his life as another success. He never looked at anything in his life as not a success, even though it was not the ultimate success. He was thrown into pit. He survived that. He was sold to the Midianites. He was survived that. He took it as a positive and worked and used it out to his best. He was then sold to the Ishmaelites. He used that out to the best. He was then sold to Potiphar. He used that out his best. Was that the complete issue? No. And then he was thrown into prison, and then he used that as best. And then he was put in front of the king. He used that out as best. Was that the complete mission? No. He waited for his brothers to come, and then he used that situation to the best. And what was the whole purpose of this whole journey? You know what the whole purpose of the whole journey from the beginning of his sail till ultimately the end where his brothers and them come together is all to bring Jacob down to Egypt. That was the whole journey. And that started off when he went down to visit his brothers. Rashi says, from the depth of Hebron. Rashi, look at Rashi, that's last week's parsha. Rashi says, what do you mean that he went from the depth of Hebron? He went from Hebron. What means me'emek Hebron? From the depth of Hebron. And Rashi over there says, it means from the prophecy of Abraham. Emek Hebron is the prophecy, the man who's buried in Hebron. At that time, the only one who was buried in Hebron was Abraham. Isaac was alive. Jacob was alive. Abraham was buried in Hebron. And the prophecy to Abraham was that Jacob will ultimately go down to Egypt. And that all started with the jealousy of the brothers and him ultimately going to see his brothers, and the rest is history. The beauty of Joseph was, as the Rebbe would say, you're not put into a situation. He realized that every situation he was in was there to harness it and to use it out. And to use it out to the best of it, to be a victorious in every situation that he was in. Was it the ultimate victory? No. The ultimate victory was not even when he was. The ultimate victory is the Jewish people ultimately in Egypt, and then they went out of Mitzrayim. That was 200 years later. Over 200 years later. Every victory. That was one of the beauties of the Rebbe. We need to celebrate our victories. Every step forward is a great celebration. Every overcoming ourselves, our evil inclinations, is a great success. Every learning one extra page is a great success. Celebrate it. Be happy. Bring more light. As the Rebbe says, the Chanukah teaches us we bring only one candle more. It's not a Havdalah candle. The beauty of Chanukah is that you're not allowed to light all the candles together. It's one candle at a time. So even though you have 8 candles at the last day of Chanukah, they each need to be separate. You can't put them all together. That's an Havdalah candle. They each need to be separate. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Every day another light. We don't make the light of yesterday bigger. We add another light. Add another light. Add another candle. Don't make the candle of yesterday bigger flame. And then the third day make it a bigger flame. No. Add another light. Add another light. Add another candle. Add another victory. Add another victory. Add another victory under your belt. And you're going to start feeling, we'll all start feeling victorious. Not failures. We'll all start feeling like we have victories under our belts. I wish you a victorious day, a victorious Chanukah. A good Rosh Chodesh. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh. I wish you all a Chodesh Tov, a happy and healthy month. God bless you all. If those that want to come tomorrow night to the comedy, want to bring some comedy in your life, you can still book. We have a couple of places available. It's going to be socially distanced outside in the parking lot. We have a great comedian, Avi Fryer. He's going to He's going to put a great show up. You're going to enjoy it. Why not? Let's have some fun together. Adults only. Let's come together. Social distance, outside, weather permitted. Let's have some fun together. I hope you come. I hope if you didn't book, you'll book it. Call up the office, 487-2934. Book it. Just book it. Okay, please, guys. So please book it. Come. We'll laugh together a little bit. And we'll have some joy of Hanukkah. Not only the lights, but we'll have some laughter. I wish you a great night. Happy Hanukkah. God bless you all. I thank the Lubavitcher Rebbe for this wonderful teaching of the teachings of Chanukah. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Amen.
Ever have a question? Any questions?
Is the party tomorrow night on Zoom as well, or
No,
just
no.